Hey everybody, my name is Tom Coyle, military veteran, and then I served as a diplomat in overseas embassies around the world. And speaking today, because I just found at my former high school, they were planning on, for their homecoming, they had the Spirit Week, people have different colors. They were originally going to do a red, white, and blue theme, but they've now rescinded that because some people thought it was somehow offensive. So I had some thoughts on this, and I kind of want to share them with you, and so bear with me. Because, it's really easy to say, you should do it, or don't do it, but I want to add some context here. So, first off, I get where this is coming from. I think there's been a lot of people looking back at our history and saying, ooh, the founding fathers owned slaves, and, women weren't allowed to vote till the 1920s, and all these types of arguments. And look what's happening today, the recent injustice, the shooting, the two white guys who shot that African-American man who was jogging. And people are looking at the sort of injustice and somehow that the American flag is not appropriate, or that somehow the American flag stands for that. And frankly, that's a bunch of baloney. And if people are led to believe the American flag does stand for that, we need to reclaim the American flag. And so here's my attempt to really explain what this flag is all about. Now, yeah, we did have slavery once upon a time, probably the biggest scar on our country. And people like to say, ooh, our founding fathers were slave owners. Yeah, half of them were. The other half were not. We almost didn't get a country formed in the first place because our founding fathers disagreed vehemently about slavery. So, yeah, we talk about Jefferson and Washington. They did have slaves, but John Adams thought slavery was an evil institution. And you had this massive debate, North versus South. A North-South divide that kind of extends to this day. But yeah, it took a bloody civil war to resolve that slavery issue. Now last year, 4th of July, Nike initially had a shoe with the American flag, the original 1776 flag. Colin Kaepernick intervened, expressed his displeasure, and Nike pulled that flag. Because of the issue how that was our flag under the era of slavery when our country was first born. Ironically, well, not ironically, but factually, the designer of that flag, Betsy Ross, was a staunch abolitionist. So, what the flag represents, I think, our colors represent, is an ideal. Now, throughout this history, we've not reached our ideal, and we are continuously improving. Yes, we had slavery. Women weren't able to vote until the 20th century. But the thing is, the flag to me represents an idea that should be celebrated. Abraham Lincoln, when he delivered his Gettysburg Address, he went back to the language of our Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal. And now, of course, we understand that to mean all people are created equal. But we had a bloody civil war before we kind of started moving toward the ideals of our nation for everybody. That was and just for your keeping score, the side that fought to end slavery was fighting under the American flag, the red, white, and blue, the stars and stripes. That was the flag flown by the army that fought to end slavery. So, this was the flag that freed oppression. We've had some issues in this country. And we've even had some issues in our foreign policy. I think a lot of it, you can, without going through, 200 plus years of history, a lot of it's misunderstanding, and making some mistakes. But I think in every instance, the intention was to do good, even if we failed at that in some cases. I spent a lot of time living in some pretty interesting countries. And I'll say this. You can take the most death to America, I hate America country in the world, and the line to get a visa is around the block. You give people who live in an oppressed country and they get their pick of where they want to go, every single person says America. Why? I had a friend of mine who came to America. Him and I do business together this day. He's built one of the fastest growing companies in America right now. Came from Nigeria. Had $200 in his pocket. And this is not just like made up. You hear these stories. This really was him. He had $200 in his pocket. And hang on, buddy. Okay, we're going to do coding and robotics, so I'm going to wrap this up here. So anyway, back on track here. We were doing this thing with So he was one of those guys came with $200 in this country. He couldn't speak English. He spoke French, but he built a company, and he said, yeah, we have our issues, but my God, he comes here with a fresh perspective because he hasn't grown up with I can't do something because or whatever, and he comes here, oh my God, compared to what I faced in my country in terms of obstacles, this is nothing. And we have problems. I mean, absolutely, but like. Here's where I look at some things that I want to address in terms of this idea that we're sort of an oppressive country. And let's take Barack Obama, for example. I bring him up because obviously this ties to our legacy of slavery and civil rights. In no country in the world today could the equivalent of Barack Obama be arrested. No, not at all. France, forget about it. You couldn't even give somebody, a white guy with Eastern European descent, couldn't even win the presidency in France. Wouldn't happen. Not a chance. England, forget about it. The UK, forget about it. Well, UK, United Kingdom, forget about it. You can't even be an Eastern European white guy running for president. You know what? Try an African American. Ooh, not a chance. Go to a European soccer game, and I've been to one in France. They actually have to have signs saying "No racism tolerated." Yeah, because you go to these games, the things they say to the black players in the game, horrendous. I mean, imagine going to an NBA game. Tommy, hang on. Imagine going to an NBA game and seeing these chants you hear in enlightened Europe, because everyone likes to talk about enlightened Europe, and what they say, if they were saying this to like LeBron James, you don't have that here. And so go back to Barack Obama. In no other country in the world could that man be elected once, much less twice. The 2016 primary, the Republicans, the party of old white people, had 2 Latinos and an African American who were in the big kids table at the debates. Remember, the Republicans had the big kids table where like the front runners were, and then the little kids table. And Ben Carson at one point actually was number 1 and number 2 in the Iowa polls. And so, this is a country that continues to improve, and we continue to get better, and we continuously strive. And we're not perfect by any means, but to me that flag and those colors and that ideology represents our attempt to be a more perfect union. And Abraham Lincoln says in the Declaration of Independence, in his Gettysburg Address, in order to create a more perfect union. It's that perfection we continuously strive for. And I don't think any country in the world is better at that than us. This still is the place of opportunity. This is still the place where you can go in here and be somebody with the least amount of obstacles. We certainly have our challenges. Obviously, we can talk about healthcare. We can talk about how certain minorities have certain disadvantages. But, I'll tell you, upward mobility is doing well. People of color have never done better in this country. Barack Obama said in his 2008 campaign, he said, look, my daughter's going to have more opportunities than the family of a white farmer in West Virginia or a white coal miner in West Virginia. This is factual. This is true. And we continue to get better. And the other thing, too, people are literally dying to get to this country. Literally dying to get here. And I think sometimes when you get here, it's I guess kind of trendy to trash America and like that, but man, look where people are. Look where the innovation happens. One thing about our country, we function despite our government. We've had Republicans, we've had Democrats, and yet somehow people still figure it out. Steve Jobs founded Apple, Bill Gates founded Microsoft in the middle of Jimmy Carter years. Not exactly the economic prosperity this country experienced, but yet they still formed a business. We don't necessarily wait. People in this country don't have to wait for the government to do something. You just go out there and do it. There are companies, I've been working with them and consulting. There are companies that are making money in this pandemic. Because, we can sit there and say, oh, well, here's the conditions. Well, let me adapt. Because we allow that flexibility to be adaptable. And yes, we have our challenges. I'm not going to sit there and say we don't. So to go back to the original thing about this, the idea that we're going to have this... one more thing I want to highlight here. I want to go back to the George W. Bush administration, again, to show where things are. Remember Kanye West said, Bush hates black people, but this is a guy who had, Bill Clinton, his predecessor, had one African American in a prominent cabinet position, Ron Brown, Secretary of Commerce. Bush had Colin Powell as his Secretary of State. And Condoleezza Rice, one of his most trusted advisors as National Security Advisor, and then in the second term, she became Secretary of State. 2 prominent African Americans in his inner circle. And as president, he did more, and him and Bono cooperated because he has done more to aid Africa than a U.S. president. Not exactly a racist guy, but according to Kanye West, he hates black people. I mean, Kanye's actually apologized for those comments. My point is we are continuously improving. And the highlight is when Barack Obama got reelected in 2012, Detroit elected a white mayor. I mean, I love that year because, our country with its legacy of slavery elected an African American for the second time, and for the first time in decades, elected a white mayor of Detroit. Why? It's showing that we're getting to a point where we're seeing beyond color. And here's another little tidbit for you. In 6 years, the vast majority of children under 18 in this country will be of mixed race. Is that hate? Under 18, vast majority mixed race. Now, I grew up in Grosse Pointe, not exactly known for its diversity, but when I go back and forth, I'm seeing more diversity. And by the way, if you'd asked me in high school what my wife was going to look like, probably would have said, blonde hair, blue eyes. Yeah, I married a Latina. And to be honest, that would have surprised me then. My mom and my parents, they're great people. But, at the time, interracial marriages when I was growing up were new. We'd watch shows like Different Strokes, and my parents would say, hey, you don't marry outside your race. And their reasons were, if maybe misplaced, there was some nobility behind it. Like, they were fearing for the grandkids. Like, i.e., if I had kids and my wife was someone of a different race, that the kids would be ostracized by both races. So it was concern for the kids. But those attitudes changed over time. That's who we are. How many of us in high school made gay jokes or said things that were hurtful to people who were different than us? Things that would put us to shame today, that we would say these things. That's a sign of us getting better. And that should be celebrated. And that, to me, is what the flag represents, that we get better, that we improve, that we continuously move to be that country we aspire to be, and that every day we move to be a part of that country, to make that country what it is, because we're always moving to perfection. And my parents today, by the time I met Isabel and I brought her home, at the stage of my life I was in, I knew I didn't have to do this conversation. Like, I still see it in movies today when there's a mixed race couple that have to sit down and explain to their parents. I didn't have to explain to my parents, hey, Mom, Dad, this is Isabel. And there was no awkwardness. There was no like, oh my God, she's Latina, it would have been no different as if I brought home someone who was blonde hair, blue eyes. I mean, my parents welcomed her. They love her like a daughter, and they have conversations together all the time, especially when I've had to, be overseas for work and that kind of thing. My mom and Isabel, they're always, tight in communication, and, it's great. And I would like to think, maybe some of my relatives who have since passed away would welcome her the way my parents had. They would have changed their attitudes the way my parents had. I mean, because, that's how we were. When things are new, we don't necessarily embrace it. It used to be like, oh my God, the Irish person's marrying a Greek person. That used to be a thing. Then after a while, that got to be socially acceptable. Oh my God, Irish and English are marrying. And so when you start mixing races, mixing cultures, it's hard at first. Then it gets to be normal. And, I look around my neighborhood, the number of interracial couples, it's not even a big deal anymore. The Bodyguard made a big thing about it when it came out. One of the things the reviewers noticed when that came out in like 92, I think it was, that it was the first movie where there was an interracial couple, Kevin Costner and a singer who died. I don't remember her name. I had it to my tongue, but Whitney Houston, thank you. Whitney Houston, I just came to my mind there. It was the first movie that didn't really bring up race in their relationship. Like, it wasn't this thing about making the thing about the race. It was just two people who fell in love. That was how it went. And it didn't really touch on the race issue. So, yeah, when you see the guys who go into Michigan with their AK-47s or M4s or whatever they got, and they're charging there and they have their American flags, and you oppose what they stand for, fine, oppose them with the American flag and say, no, this represents me as well. This flag is me as well. Now let's bring it back to the school. It's tragic they've canceled that. And frankly, if you're uncomfortable because someone's wearing a certain color or symbol, you're going to have a very hard life, because you're always going to be faced with stuff that will anger you, upset you, and you got to be able to learn to drive on. What a better way to learn this than in school? Celebrate the red, white, and blue. And have conversations about it. Why not get the students together, still have the red, white, and blue day, but have these conversations. Have an open dialogue. Let's not exclude people. Hear people out. Say, okay, I understand your perspective. Let me give you my perspective. And, at the end of the day, if students want to protest the fact that that's their constitutional right, if you want to burn the flag, that is your right as a U.S. citizen. I fought for that right. Knock yourself out. They probably won't let you do that in school property, but, you want to burn, or if you want to have a protest, fine. Do that, but don't make the entire school cower to you. And if you're somehow uncomfortable because the American flag triggers you somehow, learn a little bit about our history. We haven't been perfect, but man, we have gone a long way, and we continue to strive to get to those ideals. And it's never been a better time. Ben Carson. I hate Ben Carson, the politician, personally. Ben Carson, the man, if I ever met him, I'd be sitting down, shutting up, and taking notes. This man, who grew up a lot harder than just about anybody I know, had a harder childhood than anyone I know, became the best brain surgeon in the world. Not like the best in a look at, the best in the world. That's a man who knew how to be successful despite the odds. And yes, people do have an easier, do have it easier than others. If you were born, Donald Trump's kid or Beyonce's kid, yes, you're going to have a head start in life. That's just the way it is. But doesn't mean you're stuck where you are. So I hope this has been helpful. I apologize for my coworkers who had some noise in there, but I had to express these thoughts, and I hope this generates some discussion. So thank you for your time, for sticking around. It's almost a 17-minute video here, so I know this is long, but had a lot to kind of say and package together. So thank you for watching. And if this means something to you, please share it. If you agree, great, let me know. If you disagree, let's comment. Because after all, we come to a resolution by having open discussion where each person gets to share their points of view freely. So I welcome the debate. You disagree with me? Let's have a discussion. If you agree with me, let's also talk about it. But let's begin the discussion and really think what this flag represents. Because to me, this flag represents the ideals of what we stand for and the ideals we continuously strive to be. Thank you.